I've tried a wide range of foods with my cherry shrimp and other neocaridinas, so I wanted to publish this video going over some of the best cherry shrimp food I've tried. First up we have Snowflake Food, and I've only been using this one a couple of months now, but I honestly think it's the best general food I've ever tried with my shrimp. By general food I mean that it's something that my shrimp will eat and get sustenance from to survive, but it's not necessarily high in protein content to help with breeding the shrimp. There's a bunch of different brands out there who make Snowflake Foods now, so you don't have to use the same one as me, and there's also a couple of different flavoured options coming onto the market too. My shrimp definitely seem to prefer the regular plain Snowflake Food over the flavoured options, but they will eat any of them when added to the shrimp tanks. The main ingredient of this is soy husks, but a lot of them also contain brewer's yeast, with the various flavoured options containing various other ingredients as well for the flavouring. It's very easy to break this down to different sizes when feeding different sized shrimp colonies, and I do think this is an underrated point when it comes to cherry shrimp food. My cherry shrimp colony has around 50 shrimp in it right now, and this yellow neocaridina colony has around 30 right now. My Bloody Mary and orange neo colonies each have around 10, so I can't give the colonies all the same amount of food, so I do need to break things up when feeding them. Snowflake Food sinks as soon as it comes into contact with water, making it very easy to feed, scoring it points over some alternatives. I would always recommend that you go with the specific feed and sizes recommended on the brand of Snowflake Food you get, because different brands use slightly different manufacturing methods to compress the food, so a smaller one might actually have a lot more food in it once it expands. That brings me on to this point of using Snowflake Food, and when it comes into water, this stuff will expand and grow in size as it takes on water. It usually only takes around a minute, but as your shrimp feed on it, they will spread it around your tank, making it very easy for your shrimp to get access to the food and not have to push other shrimp out of the way. Unlike the other featured cherry shrimp foods in this video that can end up fouling your water, Snowflake Food does take a couple of days to start decaying and potentially cause any issues with your water parameters. I really don't have to worry about water parameter issues with my shrimp and Snowflake Food though. I stick to the recommended serving sizes on the packaging, and my shrimp usually eat it all within about 3 hours of it being in there, so there's no chance of it fouling my water. I give my cherry shrimp Snowflake Food once or twice a week depending on the other food options I have available, and they definitely enjoy eating it. If I could only choose 2 foods for my cherry shrimp, this would definitely be one of them, because it's pretty cheap, easy to use, easy to find, and my shrimp love it. Next up we have Fluval Bug Bites, and my shrimp absolutely love this stuff. There are a couple of different formulas on the market, but their main ingredient is usually black soldier fly larvae or a mixture of black soldier fly larvae and salmon meal. I usually use the bottom feeder formula with my cherry shrimp because it has more consistent granule sizes, making it easier to manage portion control. When it comes to portion control, I usually try to serve 1 granule per 10 shrimp in the tank, but shrimp are a nightmare to count, so it is just an estimate, but I give them this daily to spike their protein to try and encourage breeding. Feeding neocaridina shrimp daily is a little controversial, but personally I've always found that the breeding rates in my colonies are far higher when the females have easy access daily to high protein foods. This stuff can take a little while to sink, but I usually just push it under the water level with my finger, and my shrimp get on it within about 5 minutes of it being within the tank, and they'll eat it all within an hour or 2. If I could only use 2 foods with my cherry shrimp, this would definitely be the other option. I just feel that the higher protein content of bug bites helps with the breeding rates and increases the overall nutritional profile of their diet when supplementing Snowflake Food as the core food. Next up we have bloodworm, and I know that bloodworm are controversial, but my shrimp absolutely love these. To my understanding, the bulk of the controversy around using bloodworm with shrimp and fish is around the actual nutritional content of the bloodworm, and this can be an absolute pain to understand. For example, this is the nutritional data for frozen bloodworm and freeze-dried bloodworm directly off the Hikari US website right now, and they are very different. Then you have companies like Hikari that also add additional ingredients to their bloodworm products to help overcome some of the nutritional deficiencies in bloodworm and increase the overall nutritional profile. I currently use Monkfield frozen bloodworm because it's very easy to find here in the UK, but it doesn't have any of the additional vitamins and minerals in with it, so I will probably switch over to the Hikari freeze-dried bloodworm once these run out. The main thing to take from this is that cherry shrimp and my other neocaridina shrimp love to eat bloodworm, and they'll often scuffle over them when feeding and push each other out the way to get access to the food. I do only use bloodworm as a treat food, and my cherry shrimp usually get them once or twice a week, with the bloodworm replacing one of the fluval bug bites servings. There are a few videos on YouTube reporting that cherry shrimp have higher breeding rate yields when they're regularly fed bloodworm. Because I've always used bloodworm as a treat food with my cherry shrimp, I don't actually have the other side of the data to compare with this, but my old 29-gallon tank setup managed to breed hundreds and hundreds of cherry shrimp without me even trying, and I regularly fed them bloodworm once a week. In all honesty though, because I do use this as a treat food for my bloodworm, this could easily be left out of their diet, and I do think the other foods that I give them would easily give them everything they need. Next up we have algae wafers, and the main thing to remember with this food type is that all algae wafers are not created equally. I've actually tried a wide range of different brands with my shrimp, and every single one seems to get a very different reaction. My shrimp and fish pretty much ignored the heron algae wafers that you can get here in the UK, and nothing ate them, so I ended up just throwing them away. I have tried a few other brands as well that can be hit and miss, but then I tried Hikari mini algae wafers, and I highly recommend these, but I'm not 100% sure why these are actually sold as algae wafers. As you can see, fish meal is the main ingredient in these specific algae wafers, giving them a protein content of around 36%. The second and third main ingredients are both wheat based, and some people do like to avoid giving their shrimp wheat based foods, but I've never had an issue with it personally. My shrimp are definitely slow to react to these being added to their tank when compared to something like Snowflake Food, fluval bug bites or bloodworm, and it usually takes 20 to 30 minutes before the shrimp get on this, but they'll still eat it within a couple of hours once they realise it's in their tank. I try to use these around once per week with my own shrimp colonies, and I usually replace one of these snowflake servings with an algae wafer when I use them. Keep in mind these are the mini algae wafers, and most of the other ones I've tried are far larger than this, but when it comes to portion size I try to use a quarter of one of these mini algae wafers per 10 shrimp. Now I am pretty confident that my shrimp would get all of the nutrition they require from the Snowflake Food and fluval bug bites, so if I am ever on a budget this is something I'd probably drop out of their diet, but I usually use it just to mix their diet up and give them different flavoured foods. Next up we have actual algae, as in the plant matter that will passively grow in your aquarium for free. Neocaridina are great little algae eaters, and a study by Tropica found them to be the second best algae eater that they had in their test by animal size when it comes to soft algae. Now that's the main thing you have to pay attention to, because I've only ever seen my neocaridina shrimp eat soft algae types such as brown diatom algae, green spot algae and green dust algae. My old 29-gallon tank had a huge cherry shrimp colony in it, and it had problems with blackbeard algae and staghorn algae, two of the harder algae types, and I never once seen my cherry shrimp actually eating the algae, but they did seem to graze on the biofilm that would grow on top of it. Thankfully these soft algae are pretty common in aquariums, especially for the first few months after a setup, so they provide a free natural food source that my shrimp seem to love. I just wanted to include algae in the video because I often see people worrying about it and removing soft algae types from their aquariums that their cherry shrimp will eat. Next up we have leaves, specifically mulberry leaves, and I've tried a bunch of different leaves with my shrimp that are commonly recommended and they usually just get ignored. Before I go any further, I just want to quickly say I haven't tried nettle leaves yet. It is on my list, it's just a bit of a pain to find them where I live. Anyway, I saw these mulberry leaves on offer when I purchased my flavoured Snowflake Food, and they were really cheap by UK prices, so I decided to give them a try, and I'm glad I did. My cherry shrimp go crazy for these and get on them pretty much as soon as I add them to the tank. At the time of recording, I haven't tried these with any of my other shrimp colonies, just the cherry shrimp, because they are my largest current colony and it is a bit of a pain to work out the portion control with the way I prepare my leaves. So when it comes to leaf preparation, I do something slightly different to everything I've seen other YouTubers do in the space, and I use this little drown jar for my leaves rather than using them directly out of the packet in their dry form. I often see people complaining that leaves take a few days to sink once added to the tank, and then the shrimp even ignore them once they do sink because there's no algae or biofilm on them. You can easily set up these little drown jars with some water and add a couple of leaves to it and then leave them for a week, so the whole process starts well before they're added to your shrimp jar. I keep my drown jar near my 29-gallon tank so the lights from the aquarium get onto the jar and algae and biofilm can grow on the leaves as well as start the leaf decomposition. This means when the time actually comes to scoop some of these leaves out of the jar and put it into my cherry shrimp, they are ready to eat and my shrimp get on it within minutes. If you do want to try this strategy, I'd highly recommend a mason jar or something that has a very tight fitting lid, because these leaves start to stink once they start to decompose. Now if I'm honest, I probably won't rebuy these for my shrimp just because they are quite expensive here in the United Kingdom, because mulberry isn't a native tree here. But I do want to try and find some nettles that I can harvest myself for free and try them with my shrimp in the coming months. Next up we have flake foods, specifically bug bite flake foods, because they have a high protein content, decent ingredients, and I already had a tub of them. There are some other flake foods out there that have good ingredients with decent protein content, and I'd usually lean more towards the Hikari range if you can't find fluval bug bites in your area. I have tried a few different flake foods with my shrimp and usually they just ignore it, but the fluval bug bites is something they will consistently eat. Unfortunately, flake foods do take a lot longer to sink in the aquarium when compared to the granules, and it does seem that my shrimp prefer the granules, as in they react to it faster when I put it in the tank and more of them come over when they realise the food is in there. One thing that you can do with flake foods that can be a little difficult with some of the other options in the video is crush it up into a tiny little dust to try and feed your baby shrimplets. I've seen a few other YouTubers who do this, and there's a few posts on Reddit about other breeders who use this as well, but personally I rather just use Hikari First Bites instead. I just think that Hikari First Bites are a lot easier to use for this purpose because they're already crushed up and tiny and surprisingly cheap in my area, coming in at roughly the same price as a high quality flake food. That said though, if you do have high quality flakes handy because your fish eat them or something like that, then you can also use them with your cherry shrimp without issue. Finally, we have shrimp molts, and it's actually taken me a few weeks to get video footage of my shrimps eating the molts in their tanks, but they will eat them. I've seen a few people on social media and Reddit saying that they remove the shrimp molts from their tank because the shrimp don't eat them. In my experience, it does take a couple of days for the bacteria in your tank to start breaking the mold down and make it soft and easy for your shrimp to eat it, but once it does get soft, my shrimp eat it very fast. Shrimp molts can also be an important, often overlooked source of dietary calcium, as well as providing some other essential vitamins and minerals for your cherry shrimp's diet. Now there is some debate on how much dietary calcium shrimp actually need for a healthy molt, and I do think that more people are starting to lean more towards soluble calcium in the water column rather than dietary calcium being the most important. I don't use any dietary calcium supplements with any of my shrimp. I literally give them the foods listed in this video, and provided the water parameters are correct, they molt without issue. Anyway guys, that brings the video to an end. Hopefully it's been helpful and you can use one of these food suggestions with your own cherry shrimp. Thanks for watching and have a good day.